big idea.
Big idea, and it's not new in the making. Those of you who think that George Bush coined that phrase, or he's the only one over the years that has uttered that phrase, you just haven't been paying attention. Adolf Hitler used virtually the same term, ladies and gentlemen. Stalin used virtually the same term. It has been used throughout history many times by many different people, all meaning exactly the same thing. When I was in the United States Navy, ladies and gentlemen, I was attached to the Office of Naval Intelligence for the last, well, not the last, but for a period of approximately 5 years during my naval career. I had been 4 years in the United States Air Force with the Strategic Air Command, and was in the United States Navy about 11 years. And during that stint was attached to the Office of Naval Intelligence, where I learned most of the information that set me on a course to find out what was really happening to this country. Was as a member of the intelligence briefing team for the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, who at that time was Admiral Bernard Clary. I saw documents that usually only a very few people would ever see, and would never see all of these different operations and programs and projects all at once, as I and the other members of the briefing team did. Now let me explain to you how security clearances work in the government. There is no such thing, ladies and gentlemen, as above top secret. So when you hear people talking foolishly about 23 levels above top secret, they're lying to you. There's not even one level above top secret. Top secret is the highest level of classification of information in the United States government and the military service. There are sub-compartmentalizations of the classification of top secret. For instance, if you have a project that you don't want anybody to know about, even if they do have a top secret clearance, then you classify it by compartmentalizing it. An example of such a project might be building the B-2 bomber, where each person, you would only want to know just exactly what they had a need to know. So each person would be compartmentalized under top secret in an area that would give him or her only access to that particular piece of information or equipment that they were building or making or helping to assemble in order to produce the B-2 bomber. So the classification for building brakes may have been top secret wall plug. It could be anything. And the people who had a top secret clearance, who were working on that particular piece of information that had to do with wall plug, could only see that information and nothing else. Because to be able to see information that had something to do with top secret roof, if you didn't have that roof clearance added to your top secret, you would not be able to see that information. Now, I'm just making these things up to give you some idea of what I'm talking about. While I was on the briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, I noticed one thing. All of the members of the briefing team and everybody who had anything to do with intelligence were members of at least one or more of the so-called secret societies known to most of us as fraternal organizations. I wondered how I was assigned to the Office of Naval Intelligence until I began to remember how I had filled out my forms to get my security clearance. It came to a page that folded out like some of the computer paper that goes through a printer. It's all attached. You can have 5,000 feet of computer paper if you want to. Well, this was the form that folded out like that, and I forget how many sheets of paper there were included that were attached like this, all folded up, that contained the lists of just about every kind of organization that you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen. And I was supposed to check or indicate any of those organizations that I had ever belonged to in my life. And it cautioned me that if I left out any organization that I had ever been a member of, that I would risk losing or not obtaining my security clearance. Well, the security clearance when you work in the government or in the military is a big thing, folks, and nobody wants to lose their security clearance or be denied a security clearance. It's shameful, as a matter of fact. And so I noticed that one of the organizations I had belonged to in my life, called the Order of the Demolay, or the Demolay Order for Young Men, was not included. So I checked Freemasonry, because the Demolay organization for young men, or teenage boys, as a matter of fact, is the adolescent version of the Masonic Lodge, so to speak. Little did I know that when I checked Freemasonry, so that I could never be accused of leaving anything out, any of the organizations that I had belonged to, that I would be signed to the Office of Naval Intelligence and then ultimately to the briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet. And so that's how I got assigned. And while I was there, I saw, ladies and gentlemen, and learned very quickly that the American people are very seldom, if ever, told the truth about literally anything. For instance, while President Nixon, and folks, don't blame it all on President Nixon, they all do it. This is the established policy of the national security apparatus. You don't tell anybody anything they don't have a need to know. And you never tell the American people the truth about what's happening, ever. It's just that simple. They don't have a need to know. Well, President Nixon was telling the nation on television that we were not bombing North Vietnam, that we had no troops in Cambodia or Laos, that we had not put any of our people in Cambodia or Laos, that we were not bombing or strafing or doing any air missions in Cambodia or Laos. I was sitting there with a group of high-ranking naval officers waiting for the latest bombing results of North Vietnam and the latest situation reports of our combat missions in Cambodia and Laos. So I knew early on that the American people were being lied to. And they're being lied to about everything, folks. The Vietnam War had nothing to do with communism, had nothing to do with any of the politics in Southeast Asia, as the American people have been told. It had absolutely everything to do with the drugs in what's known as the Golden Triangle and with the oil in the Gulf of Tonkin and the South China Sea. The number one mission of the United States Navy in the Gulf of Tonkin was not to support the troops engaged in battle on the ground in South Vietnam, but was to protect the oil exploration ships which were locating the places that were scheduled to begin drilling for oil when we won the war. Well, it turned out that we didn't win the war. At the same time, the Central Intelligence Agency was taking over from the French the manufacture and the exportation of drugs from Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and the what's known as the Golden Triangle, in order to use those drugs to bring in tons and tons of money for their black projects that they cannot get money for from Congress, and for the ultimate use in destroying all existing sovereign nation states and bringing about a one-world totalitarian socialist government. Now, folks, this was a long, long time ago that I saw this information. I was at the headquarters of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet between 1970 and 1973. In fact, I left in February of 1973. And during that time, I learned all of the things that I needed to know to do the research since then to arrive at the information that I'm going to give you right now. And so pay close attention. If I don't finish it today, I will, in fact, continue it tomorrow. And this is what you need to know. For those of you who are going to laugh or scoff and say that you don't believe it, that's fine. I don't care. You do what you want to do with the information, but nobody in this world can ever accuse me of not having given it to you. The plan for the destruction of the United States of America and the formation of a socialist, totalitarian, one-world government under the United Nations is contained, ladies and gentlemen, within a set of top-secret documents with the title Majesty 12, spelled Majesty-Twelve. And no, ladies and gentlemen, I did not say Majestic 12. I said Majesty 12, spelled out, no space between Majesty and 12. The type, font, is a key to access of this information. All I can remember is it was a type of sans serif. It was tall, very thin type. And in order to have access to this information, you had to have a top-secret Q, magic, spelled M-A-J-I-C, clearance, which we all had on the briefing team. We had access to anything that the Admiral had access to because we compiled the information and delivered it to him in briefings every morning in the briefing room. The term Majesty 12 honors the planned placement of ultimate power in a body of what they call a Council of Wise Men, sort of like the National Security Council. These men are destined to rule the world as the behind the scenes, that is, not known to the public, of a, quote, Messiah, end quote, frontman. This Messiah, or so-called Messiah, won't really be a Messiah, but the public will look at him or her as such. This Messiah will serve as a buffer between the real rulers, the Council of Wise Men, and the sheeple of the world. Now, I discovered this plan between 1970 and 1973 while I was a member of the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, and I didn't understand all of it at that time. I didn't really know what it was that I had access to. The plan, ladies and gentlemen, outlines the formation of a world totalitarian socialist government. It is the policy of the United States government. It is to be ruled by a behind-the-scenes Council of Wise Men. A benevolent dictator who is thought to be a Messiah will be perceived as the real head of government. The Constitution of the United States of America and its Bill of Rights will be scrapped. A parliamentary form of government will take its place. All military forces and individuals are to be disarmed except for an internal police force which will carry only the minimum weapons needed to maintain internal order. There will only be one military force. Our military forces at the present time are acting as this force. It will be a world police force under the United Nations in sufficient numbers and with state-of-the-art technology so that it will be able to field overwhelming forces against any perceived threat to the world supra-government. If you doubt this, and if you doubt that it is the avowed policy of the United States government, see State Department Publication 7277, which outlines the formation of this world police force. The military of the United States of America is currently filling the requirement. The senior officer corps of all of our military forces have betrayed their oaths of allegiance to the Constitution and have joined the conspiracy. They are, in fact, traitors, and they are, in fact, engaged in high treason. The source of this conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen, will be found in the body known as the Illuminati. It is made up of the highest adepts of the combined total of the so-called fraternal orders and secret societies. These people are bound together by blood oaths, a secret religion, and the promise of an elite status within regional government and the world supra-government. To put it in their own words, quote, if you are not one of us, you are nothing, end quote. Their religion is based upon the Kabbalah and the Luciferian philosophy. They are not bound by any oath or allegiance save their own. They are loyal to no government or people save their own, and they are citizens of no country save their already in place secret world government. To understand some sense of feel for the concept and how this is being done right under your very noses, see a movie called They Live. Now, I'm not telling you that They Live is a true movie. I'm telling you that in this movie, the concept of how they are carrying about the destruction from within is presented to you in a method that you will clearly and easily be able to understand. Now, you cannot ever hope to understand the philosophy of any branch of the so-called mystery school, which is the Illuminati, without many years of study and a complete knowledge of their symbolic language. You must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that like many other organizations, they attract those who completely miss the boat or are just too stupid to get it. When you join a branch of the Brotherhood by any name, I don't care what you call it, Freemasonry, the Theosophical Society, the Anthroposophic Society, Fraternitas Rosae Cruci, Knights Templar, Sovereign and Military Knights of Malta, or any other fraternal order or secret society, no one ever sits down with you and explains the meaning of anything. An actual, literal, esoteric education would just be too dangerous. It could result in public expose, something which the Illuminati must avoid at any cost. The organization of the order is a pyramidal structure of degrees. On the bottom are the so-called blue lodges, full of ignorant, materialistic, and opportunistic fools. And yes, folks, I said fools, and I mean it. Anyone who would join a secret society and be told up front, right in the beginning, that they're not going to learn anything, not one single thing about it, until they have been initiated and climb up the ladder of degrees in the organization, cannot be anything other than fools. They might be joining a society of murderers, for all they know. Promising candidates are chosen to be helped up the ladder of initiation by the help of those who have gone before. The initiate is presented with the objects of study, books, symbols, ritual, and camaraderie. But illumination must come from within. Each degree of initiation provides a new key to ultimate enlightenment, but only for those who can truly understand the ritual and symbols of the degree. Everyone at the bottom rungs of the ladder of initiation, especially those in the Blue Lodge in the first 3 degrees, don't know beans jack dip about anything about what they belong to and never will. Where understanding or the ability to keep the secrets stops, the progress of the candidate stops, and they never, ever progress any higher. Only those above the 29th degree have the ability to understand the ultimate secrets and goals of the order. A very promising select few are handpicked for progress beyond the 32nd degree. Those chosen disappear behind the veil and become one of the, quote, 1,000 points of light, end quote, but they are more properly known as the Magi. That process has always been the protection of the Illuminati in a Christian world that has had a tendency to burn at the stake those who differed in belief or philosophy. The burning alive of men like Giordano Bruno and Jacques de Molay, the persecution of their orders, and persecution of men like Galileo by the Catholic Church has resulted in the Brotherhood's hatred of Christianity and the goal of the ultimate extermination of all religions save theirs. Now listen to me carefully. The goal is the ultimate extermination of all religions except for their religion. And yes, there is a religion. The philosophy at the core, ladies and gentlemen, of all of the mystery schools is the foundation and the font of socialism and communism. Most socialists don't have the slightest idea that they are puppets of an arcane philosophy bent upon world's domination. They actually believe they will ultimately realize a world where everything is free courtesy of Big Brother, and where all risk and worry has disappeared. Any such world would only be a world of slaves dependent upon an elite class of masters. What fools! The philosophy of the mystery school is the Luciferian philosophy, as put forth by that's Christopher Albert Pike, who was one of the founders of the Ku Klux Klan. But it is not his original thought. He just expounded upon it in forms that eventually became accessible to those who seek it, like me. Before you begin blabbering that Albert Pike's name never included Christopher, you'd better look up the meaning of that name and further understand that the Christ of the Mysteries has absolutely nothing to do with the Christ of the New Testament, at least not in the manner in which it is interpreted by the Christian church. Christopher literally means Christ-like. And in the mystery religion, in the ranks of the Illuminati, Albert Pike reached what they call apotheosis. He became Christ-like, is an ascended master, helping to guide them from the so-called spirit world. If you'll look straight up, standing in the rotunda of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., you'll see that they believe the same thing happened to George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. Pictured on the inside of the Capitol dome, you will see George Washington in the chariot of Apollo, riding across the sky, surrounded around the periphery of the dome with all the old gods of the Roman pantheon. Now, if you want some sense of how these things are being brought about, watch the series Star Trek, from the beginning episodes up to the present. And you will begin to realize that it was an indoctrination into the concepts of socialism through subliminal initiation of the youth of the nation. The captains, James T. Kirk and Christopher Pike, are symbolic salutes to the Order of the Knights of the Temple of Jerusalem and to the Brotherhood's greatest philosopher and probably its most prolific writer, Christopher Albert Pike. Those who understand the symbolic language would have noticed the most recent Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Awards ceremony recognized the coming of the, quote, new dawn, end quote, with the rising sun in the backdrop and the two triple crowns of the mysteries representing the Trinity of Osiris, Isis, and the child Horus on each side. And you thought they were just statues of the Oscar. Very simply, ladies and gentlemen, the philosophy is, quote, Adam and Eve were held prisoner in the chains of ignorance by an unjust and vindictive God in the Garden of Eden. They were set free from their bonds by Lucifer, known in the myths as Prometheus. And the setting free of their bonds is called evolution, or primordial knowing. They were set free by Lucifer through his agent Satan in the guise of a serpent, which is the ancient symbol of wisdom, with the gift of intellect, known in the mysteries as fire. Through the use of his intellect, they believe man will perfect the race, the Aryan race, Anglo-Aryan race to be exact, and will himself become God. It is a metaphor for the development of the thinking man through the process of evolution and the eventual domination of the universe by learning how to dominate and control nature. This process is called magic. The result will be the apotheosis of the race of mankind and the elimination of all who cannot make this paradigm shift in the coming new age. The alchemists had the same religion, but disguised it, ladies and gentlemen, under the profane interpretation of the exoteric or outward expression of turning lead into gold. The search for the philosopher's pure red stone was really the attempt to perfect the soul of mankind. Don't you really feel pretty smart now? I hope so. I hope a light is coming on in your head, because of a lot of this you have seen glimpses of, little pieces here and there. Some of the symbology has mystified you. Some of it will gel in your mind as you hear this. Those who are attracted to the mysteries, ladies and gentlemen, who are unable to grasp the esoteric meaning of their education, often take the exoteric meaning to be the truth and turn to Satan or Lucifer as their object of worship, never understanding the metaphor for a much deeper philosophy. The order never objects to this because these Satan worshippers are useful in their own manner. They furnish a diversion and are often a source of large sums of money, although the Brotherhood, folks, have seldom found themselves lacking in fools or funds. Shirley MacLaine understands the philosophy perfectly, though probably not in its correct interpretation. She is a member in good standing. I am God is, of course, the true message. Fire is the god of the mysteries, and its priests are the philosophers of fire. They believe that any concept of creation must result in the idea that all things are manifestations of the Creator, which is pantheism. Since man is the only creation with intelligence and original thought, the combined or collective consciousness of mankind, they believe, is the mind of God. Ergo, man is God. And that should enlighten you to the source of some of the more difficult to understand concepts of the so-called New Age movement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, don't get the fool, called by the mysteries the profane, mixed up with the king or the initiate known as Fraternitas Rex Mundi. Those who cannot understand this philosophy through the hidden language of symbology and make the shift in thinking for the coming millennium are doomed to extinction. And the spokespersons for the New Age make absolutely no secret of this fact. It has been published over and over and over again that those who cannot make this so-called paradigm shift will simply be exterminated. Wake up, America, you've been had, and wise up. None of you, and I'll say it again and again, and I don't care how angry you get with me, it is absolutely true. None of you are even remotely as smart as you think you are. This is the age of deception, and the world is balanced upon a razor. One half is scheduled to be exterminated if these people have their way, and the other half is scheduled to be enslaved when the mystical union between the moon, which is Isis or the church, and the sun, which is Osiris or the doctrine, greets the sun, spelled S-O-N, of the morning, which is Horus or the full body of initiates or adepts, on the horizon, which is Horus risen, in the, quote, new dawn, end quote, which is the realization of the New World Order. With that in mind, read the full text of President Clinton's 1997 State of the Union address to Congress. And if a light doesn't flick on in your brain when you read that, you are beyond help. He said, "We are watching the sun set while we prepare our children for the new dawn. We have 1,000 days to complete our work." Wake up. This conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen, is also extremely racist. These people consider blacks, Hispanics, and Aboriginal people to be, quote, useless eaters, end quote. They believe, or at least profess, that the Anglo-Aryan race is the true Israel, and thus the master race. Now, in all truth, the leaders of this subversion don't believe any such thing, ladies and gentlemen, but they use this as a tool to manipulate and guide these silly idiots who do. Despite the racism of the Illuminati, they have convinced the useless eaters that they are their friends, benefactors, and protectors. And while destroying these poor people with socialism, they have convinced them that Marx is their savior. And these sheeple follow this Judas goat eagerly, first to be sheared, and then to their re-enslavement and eventual, probably, slaughter. In this world government, there will be no individual rights, only privileges. Privileges can be granted or denied at will by the world super-government. All property is to be owned by the state. There will be a redistribution of wealth in order to eliminate class differences and level the standard of living to a much lower level in the advanced nations, such as the United States of America, and to a higher standard of living in the so-called third world nations. This leveling of the standard of living will be accomplished through a global economic collapse, which right now, regardless of what you see happening in this phony stock market, is in its beginning stages. The economic collapse will fulfill the goal of Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, which mandates the elimination of the middle class. The graduated income tax, NAFTA, and GATT, which have caused industry to move into third world nations in order that corporations may exploit cheap labor, are also a part of this process. All county and state governments are to be eliminated and replaced with regional government. And those of you listening who are in county and state and city governments already have felt the pressure to bring this about. These regional governments are, in fact, already in place. Regionalism is gradually taking control throughout America. There will be no more cash money. All trade will be accomplished by a system of computer credits, with accounts accessed through debit cards or computer chip implants, which will also serve as personal identification, driver's license, and etc. The plan, ladies and gentlemen, for the creation of a socialist world government is protected by an invented extraterrestrial threat from space. The entire UFO phenomenon and the so-called ufology, which I call the ufology movement, has been created to further the protection and activation of this plan. Within Majesty 12 is Operation Majority, which justifies the plan by presenting an extraterrestrial threat as the reason for the necessity for world government. Operation Majority is named after the original Bolshevik party which sparked the Russian Revolution. Bolshevik literally means the majority. The plan states that if the American people are ever told of this extraterrestrial presence, these aliens will destroy the United States of America. Now, folks, all who have access to this plan, who inadvertently discover the plan, are silenced by that warning. And when I first saw it, I believed it for over 16 years before I began to produce research that told me that this was all the biggest hoax in the history of the world to create a phony, artificial threat to this earth. The report from Iron Mountain confirmed it. Statements made in 1917 by John Dewey, that's 1917, ladies and gentlemen, by John Dewey, in a speech he made in New York, also confirmed it. In my study of the broadcast on CBS, which was owned and created by William Paley, who, ladies and gentlemen, has always been an operative of the intelligence community of the United States of America, confirmed it. A further safeguard ensures that anyone who links the so-called alien threat with the coming world government will be ridiculed and discredited by the press. When I saw this plan while I was in the Navy, I believed it. It was not until I had performed many years of research that I was able to fully understand exactly what it was that I had seen. It was extremely difficult, at best, for me to believe that my government and the Navy had used me in the manner in which they had, especially since I had dedicated my life to government and military service. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this plan is real. The extraterrestrial threat is artificial. The alien threat, or so-called alien threat, is presented as real through the use of secret technology which was originally developed by the Germans in their secret weapons programs during World War II, by geniuses like Nikola Tesla and many others. Most military and government personnel who have access to this material believe sincerely that the extraterrestrial threat is real. They, like I, could not and will not probably understand how they are being manipulated and lied to. It took me many years to understand it. None of them, and I can say this absolutely with no hesitation whatsoever, not one single one of them has ever seen any evidence of the existence of any extraterrestrial creature or any advanced technology other than that of human origin. All, and I mean all, ladies and gentlemen, so-called leaks are intentional disinformation projects perpetrated by the counterintelligence divisions of the various organizations within the intelligence community, which are designed to promote the artificial alien threat scenario while allowing for complete deniability on the part of government. The antics of Vicky Cooper, no relation, now Vicky Cooper Ecker, Donald Francis Ecker III, William Moore, Jamie Chandere, Stanton T. Friedman, Bud Hopkins, John Lear, Linda Moulton Howe, Art Bell, George Knapp, Colonel Philip Corso, the so-called alien autopsy film, which is a fake, fraud, hoax, NASA, the Mars meteorite, supposedly containing fossil evidence of life on Mars, and many other people and events are projects of this type. The plan, ladies and gentlemen, to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to the Earth was first mentioned by John Dewey in New York during 1917 in a speech to the visiting Japanese imperial delegation headed by Viscount Ishii. The premise was tested for credibility with the CBS presentation of The War of the Worlds by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on October the 30th, 1938. The public believed that this broadcast was a real news event. Many people jumped out of windows. In Grover's Mill, New Jersey, farmers and residents ran out of their homes and, forgetting who they were and where they were, shot their own water tower to shreds, believing that it was one of these alien tripod death machines. The public believed that what they heard was real, and thus it set the stage for the implementation of an alien threat scenario. The only problem was that the state-of-the-art of technology at that time did not allow for a believable presentation. The development of saucer-shaped wingless and tailless flying machines by the Germans during World War II and by the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and most probably Australia after World War II solved the problem. Now, we recently came in the possession of a document that was released to us through the Freedom of Information Act from the Central Intelligence Agency. And here's what the document says. Memorandum to Director, Psychological Strategy Board, subject flying saucers. 1. I am today transmitting to the National Security Council a proposal, tab A, in which it is concluded that the problems connected with unidentified flying objects appear to have implications for psychological warfare as well as for intelligence and operations. 2. The background for this view is presented in some detail in tab B. 3. I suggest that we discuss at an early board meeting the possible offensive or defensive utilization of these phenomena for psychological warfare purposes. Signed, Walter B. Smith, known as General Walter Bedell Smith, who at that time was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot use something for psychological warfare or for intelligence and operations. You cannot use them for defensive utilization or for psychological warfare purposes unless you are the ones who have complete and total control over these objects. After World War II, the announcement of the Jewish Holocaust, the proposal of a world government which would prevent future wars and genocide by the formation of the United Nations in 1945, and the announcement of sightings of flying saucers by Kenneth Arnold. My tongue is getting a little tied here, folks. By Kenneth Arnold, an ex-intelligence officer in 1947, launched this deception. And since then, by the way, every single person connected with UFOs has been a member of some branch of the intelligence community. The natural guilt harbored by the men of the 509th Atomic Bomb Wing after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki made them eager conspirators in orchestrating the faked crash of an extraterrestrial craft and discovery of shaved and surgically altered monkeys near Roswell, New Mexico. The artificial extraterrestrial threat was thus implanted in the public consciousness. We also have in our possession another recently released document, this one from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that literally tells the truth about Roswell, New Mexico. It's from the FBI office in Dallas to the director and senior agent in charge in Cincinnati. That's the director of the FBI and the senior agent in charge in Cincinnati. Urgent. Flying disc information concerning, and that's blacked out, Headquarters 8th Air Force telephonically advised this office that an object purporting to be a flying disc was recovered near Roswell, New Mexico this date. The disc is hexagonal in shape and was suspended from a balloon by cable, which balloon was approximately 20 feet in diameter. There are several words blacked out. Further advised that the object found resembles a high-altitude weather balloon with a radar reflector, but that telephonic conversation between their office and Wright Field had not, this is blanked out, and then borne out this belief. Disc and the balloon being transported to Wright Field by special plane for examination. Information provided this office because of national interest in case blank, that's blacked out, and fact that National Broadcasting Company, Associated Press, and others attempting to break story of location of disc today. Another two words are blacked out. Advised would request Wright Field to advise Cincinnati office results of examination, no further investigation being conducted. And then it has all the routing and the typical stuff on it. This is an authentic document. It is real, and it tells the truth. Now, applying Hitler's concept, ladies and gentlemen, of the big lie, the artificial extraterrestrial threat was nurtured and built into an always present possibility over the next 50 years. Eventually, a large percentage of the world's population, including many of you listening, found themselves believing in alien ships, extraterrestrial visitation, alien mutilation of animals, which is really the byproduct of the government's experimentation with low-level radiation effects upon animals and humans across the country, downwind of atomic power plants, nuclear weapon assembly plants, and various other facilities that occasionally, on purpose or by accident, release radiation into the atmosphere. And alien abductions of humans with absolutely, and I'll say this again, with absolutely no proof that extraterrestrials exist anywhere in the universe, much less that any have ever visited this planet whatsoever. To try to obtain any, just in case some exists, some organizations have offered as much as $1 million reward to anyone who will bring forth any shred of any evidence whatsoever of the proof of the existence of extraterrestrial life. Not one single person has ever come forward to claim any of these rewards ever at any time. The artificial threat is further advanced through the mind control programming of Marxists in Hollywood, television, advertising, publishing houses, and of course the vast ufology movement, all of which are in the complete control of the Illuminati and the intelligence community. Fear, ladies and gentlemen, is instilled through the incidental use of terror, inspired by the cattle and animal mutilation byproducts of the government's secret radiation monitoring operations and the so-called alien abduction scenario induced by state-of-the-art and extremely sophisticated mind control operations. To make interstellar travel believable, NASA was created. The Apollo space program foisted the idea that man could travel to and walk upon the moon. Every Apollo mission was carefully rehearsed and then filmed in large sound stages at the Atomic Energy Commission's top-secret test site in the Nevada desert and in a secured and guarded soundstage at the Walt Disney Studios, within which was a huge-scale mock-up of the moon. All names, missions, landing sites, and events in the Apollo space program echo the occult metaphors, rituals, and symbology of the Illuminati's secret religion. One of the most transparent was the faked explosion on Apollo 13, which was the metaphor for the initiation ceremony involving the death, which was the explosion, placement in the coffin, which was the period of uncertainty of their survival, communion with the spiritual world and the imparting of esoteric knowledge to the candidate, which was their orbit and observation of the moon without physical contact, rebirth of the initiate, which is the solution of the problem and repairs, and the raising up by the grip of the lion's paw, which is the reentry and recovery of Apollo 13. 13 is the number of death and rebirth, death and reincarnation, sacrifice, the phoenix, the Christ, not the Christ that you know, ladies and gentlemen, and the transition from the old to the new. Another revelation to those who understand the symbolic language of the Illuminati is the hidden meaning of the names of the space shuttles. Now listen to me very carefully. Quote, a Columbian enterprise to endeavor for the discovery of Atlantis, and all challengers shall be destroyed, end quote. Exploration of the moon stopped because it was impossible to continue the hoax without being ultimately discovered. And of course, they ran out of pre-filmed episodes. No man, no human man, has ever ascended higher than 300 miles, if that high, above the Earth's surface in any publicly known space program. No man has ever orbited, landed on, or walked upon the moon in any publicly known space program. If we ever went to the moon, ladies and gentlemen, it was not in the Apollo space program. If we have ever been to the moon, it has been done in secret with a far different technology. Just to give you one example, scientists have stated publicly, ladies and gentlemen, that for a human being to survive transportation through the Van Allen radiation belt, which completely encloses this Earth, encircles this Earth, it would take 4 feet of lead. Now just think about that. The tremendous radiation encountered in the Van Allen belt, the solar radiation, cosmic radiation, temperature control, and many other problems connected with space travel prevent living organisms leaving our atmosphere with our known level of technology. Any intelligent high school student with a basic physics book can prove NASA faked the Apollo moon landings. Any photographer who is even remotely worth his salt can prove that almost all of the photographs presented to us as being taken in space or on the moon by the Apollo space program are fraud, are fake, are phony. All of them were made with studio lighting in specially prepared buildings and mock-ups of the lunar surface. Now, if you doubt this, please explain, ladies and gentlemen, how the astronauts walked upon the moon's surface enclosed in a spacesuit in full sunlight, absorbing a minimum of 265 degrees of heat surrounded by a vacuum. NASA tells us the moon has no atmosphere and that the astronauts were surrounded by the vacuum of space. Heat is defined as the vibration or movement of molecules within matter. The faster the molecular motion, the higher the temperature. The slower the molecular motion, the colder the temperature. Absolute zero is that point where all molecular motion ceases. In order to have hot or cold, molecules must be present. A vacuum is a condition of nothingness where there are no molecules. There is no hot and no cold in a vacuum. Vacuums exist, however, in degrees. Some scientists tell us that there is no such thing as an absolute vacuum, but that space is the closest thing to an absolute vacuum that is known to man. There are so few molecules present in most areas of what we know as space that any concept of hot or cold is absolutely impossible to measure and, in fact, for all intents and purposes, does not exist. A vacuum is a perfect insulator. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why a thermos bottle or a vacuum bottle is used to store hot or cold liquids in order to maintain the temperature for the longest time possible without reheating or recooling. You see, space is not cold. Space insulates whatever is in space and tends to keep it at whatever temperature it is for the longest period of time possible. Radiation of all types will travel through a vacuum, but will not affect the vacuum. Radiant heat from the sun travels through the vacuum of space, but does not warm space. In fact, the radiant heat of the sun has no effect whatsoever until it strikes matter. Molecular movement will increase in direct proportion to the radiant energy which is absorbed by matter. The time it takes to heat matter exposed to direct sunlight in space is determined by its color, its elemental properties, its distance from the sun, and its rate of absorption of radiant heat energy. And at this point, we're going to have to call it a day. And I will continue right here where I left off tomorrow. That is, if I'm still here to do it, ladies and gentlemen. And God bless each and every single one of you. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all ready for tonight's broadcast. This is a live broadcast. And we're going to talk about documents that I saw while I was with the Office of Naval Intelligence, specifically on the intelligence briefing team of the United States Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, who at that time was Admiral Bernard Clarey. These documents outlined the coming formation of a one-world socialist government. There were many different aspects to this plan. One called for the ultimate unification of all religions into one, or to put it another way, the destruction of all existing religions, save the religion of the group that is bringing about what is known to most of us as the New World Order. It is, in fact, and it was revealed by this plan, that they are the sum total of the highest adepts of all of the secret societies and so-called fraternal orders, which as one body make up the mystery schools, or the ancient mystery religion of Babylon. This plan called for the creation of an external, artificial, and I stress that word artificial, threat to this earth. The entire ufology movement, ladies and gentlemen, is a creation meant to bring that about. Don't go away. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, and we will continue. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is a plan to bring about a new world order, and a lot of the things that you see happening in the world today are a direct result of action taken to complete that plan. Now, many of you aren't going to believe a word that I'm saying, and that's okay. You will find out eventually, I can assure you. And just as a little aside here, over the years that I've been warning people about this and teaching people the truth about what's really going on, I have made probably 200 or 300 predictions. I've only been wrong once. All of my predictions have come true, ladies and gentlemen, except for one, and that was my prediction that Manuel Noriega would not be tried in an American court nor serve any time in an American prison because it was against the law of nations for somebody like the United States to arbitrarily decide to arrest the leader of a foreign country. Just as their diplomats have immunity when they are here in this nation representing their country, the heads of government of all countries have diplomatic immunity unless they are captured as an act of war. But that was no war, ladies and gentlemen. It may have been an act of war, but it was no war. It was a police action. I mean, our troops went down there specifically to arrest Manuel Noriega on charges put forward by the Justice Department in a United States court. It was unlawful. But at that time, I was not aware that they were so far along in their plans that the concept of sovereign nations no longer stands. which means if another nation ever becomes more powerful than the United States of America, they can do the same thing to us, ladies and gentlemen, or the United Nations. If the Security Council votes to arrest the President of the United States based upon the precedent that we set in Panama, they can do it. Now, I'm going to overlap on yesterday's broadcast just a little bit to make sure that we're not behind in anything. I want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't want to come in the middle of something that we started yesterday, so we're going to back up a little bit. And I'm going to go over some material that we have already covered. As always, when you listen to the Hour of the Time, folks, make sure you have pen and paper handy and that you use it. Take copious notes. And once you have this information and you understand it, if you watch the events happening in the world, all of a sudden, things will begin to come together and make sense to you that made no sense to you ever before in your life. If you really believe that things on the worldwide scale happen all the time by accident, then you're not playing with a full deck of cards, folks. If all of these things were happening by accident, at least some of them would happen in our favor. But they're not. The law of averages, the laws of statistics say that eventually the card has to come up in our favor. We have to get a winning hand. But we are continually losing big time. And I mean big time. So let's back up. Remember, I talked yesterday about the creation of an artificial alien threat to this earth to facilitate the destruction of sovereign nations, the coming together as one humanity under a one world government, with all people willing to make whatever sacrifices are called upon them to make, such as giving up all your liberties and freedoms and anything else they may ask you to do, in order to oppose this external threat. And I talked about a lot of other things, but if you want to go back and cover those, folks, you're going to have to buy the tape. Now, this radio station and this broadcast is owned and operated by the Independence Foundation Trust, which is a non-profit charitable organization. So if you want to find out how to acquire the tapes of any broadcast of the Hour of the Time, write to Harvest Trust. That's Harvest Trust. P.O. Box 2470, Pine Top, Arizona 85935. That's Harvest Trust. P.O. Box 2470, Pine Top, Arizona 85935. Or you can call 520-333-4578. We now continue with today's broadcast. In order to make interstellar travel believable, which nobody was buying, nobody understanding the vast distances in space could even remotely conceive that somebody from some other star could make the journey from their planet to here. Not only that, but nobody could understand how they could find this planet or even want to come here, given the billions and billions of choices that there are in the universe. So in order to make this believable, which absolutely had to occur for this scam to be swallowed by the people of the world, NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, was created. The Apollo space program, ladies and gentlemen, foisted the idea that man could travel to and walk upon the moon. Every single Apollo mission was carefully rehearsed and then filmed in large sound stages at the Atomic Energy Commission's top-secret test site in the Nevada desert, and in a secured and guarded sound stage at the Walt Disney Studios, within which was a huge-scale mock-up of the moon. All the names, missions, landing sites, and events in the Apollo space program echoed the occult metaphors, rituals, and symbology of the Illuminati's secret religion. One of the most transparent, not the most, but one of the most transparent, was the faked explosion on Apollo 13, which was the metaphor for the initiation ceremony involving the death, which was the explosion, placement in the coffin, which was the period of uncertainty of their survival, communion with the spiritual world and the imparting of esoteric knowledge to the candidate, which was the orbit and observation of the moon without physical contact, rebirth of the initiate, which was the solution of the problem and repairs, and the raising up by the grip of the lion's paw, which was the re-entry and recovery of Apollo 13. 13, ladies and gentlemen, is no coincidence. It is the number of death and rebirth, death and reincarnation, sacrifice, the phoenix, the Christ, but not the Christ that you know if you are a Christian, and the transition from the old to the new. Another revelation to those who understand the symbolic language of the Illuminati is the hidden meaning of the names of the space shuttles. Listen to this very carefully. I assume that you all know the names of the space shuttles. If you don't, they are all included in this sentence. Quote, "A Columbian enterprise to endeavor for the discovery of Atlantis, and all challengers shall be destroyed," end quote. Exploration of the moon, ladies and gentlemen, stopped because it was impossible to continue the hoax without being ultimately discovered. They were pressing their luck as it was. And of course, they ran out of pre-filmed episodes. No man, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me very carefully, no man has ever ascended higher than 300 miles, if indeed any have ever ascended that high above the Earth's surface. No man has ever orbited, landed on, or walked upon the moon in any publicly known space program. If man has exceeded the 300-mile limit, and if man has ever truly been to the moon, it has been done in secret and with a far different technology. It was not done in the Apollo space program. And any high school student with a basic physics book can prove it. The tremendous radiation encountered in the Van Allen belt, a belt surrounding the Earth, ladies and gentlemen, of such intense radiation that before this information became embarrassing, scientists stated unequivocally that for a man to get through the Van Allen belt without frying in this radiation, he would need a 4-foot-thick lead shield. But that's not all. In space, there is solar radiation. You see, standing on the surface of the Earth or anywhere within our atmosphere, even a thin atmosphere, we are protected from the solar radiation and from the tremendous increase above the normal solar radiation that is created by solar flares and flung throughout the universe. Most of them are unpredictable, cannot be predicted. There's no such thing as saying we're going to send a man from the Earth to the moon during this period of time because we know there's not going to be any solar flares or solar storms. And thus they'll be safe from radiation. Cannot be done. On top of that, there's cosmic radiation. On top of that, there is a tremendous problem with temperature control and many other problems connected with space travel, which prevent living organisms leaving our atmosphere with our known level of technology. As I said, any intelligent high school student with a basic physics book can prove NASA faked the Apollo moon landings. Now, if you doubt this, ladies and gentlemen, please explain how the astronauts walked upon the moon's surface enclosed in a spacesuit in full sunlight, absorbing a minimum of 265 degrees of heat surrounded by a vacuum. 265 degrees, ladies and gentlemen, is 55 degrees above the boiling point of water. Now, it would take one hell of an air conditioning system to keep them cool. NASA tells us the moon has no atmosphere and that the astronauts were surrounded by the vacuum of space. Well, if that's true, ladies and gentlemen, heat is defined as the vibration or movement. Heat is defined, ladies and gentlemen, as the vibration or movement of molecules within matter. The faster the molecular motion, the higher the temperature. The slower the molecular motion, the colder the temperature. Absolute zero is that point where all molecular motion ceases. In order to have hot or cold, ladies and gentlemen, molecules must be present. NASA tells us that space is absolute zero, that it is colder than any cold that any person has ever experienced, because absolute zero is like 200 and something degrees below the zero that you know about. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That is a lie. NASA has intentionally lied to us all of these years. Space is a vacuum. A vacuum is a condition of nothingness where there are no molecules. Vacuums, ladies and gentlemen, exist in degrees. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Some scientists tell us that there is no such thing as an absolute vacuum. But space is the closest thing to an absolute vacuum that has ever been known to us. There are so few molecules present in most of the areas of what we know as space that any concept of hot or cold is absolutely impossible to measure. For all intents and purposes, it cannot be measured, does not exist. Now remember, a vacuum is a perfect insulator. That's why a thermos bottle or a vacuum bottle is used by all of you to store your hot or cold liquids in order to maintain the temperatures for the longest time possible without reheating or recooling. Same thing in space, ladies and gentlemen. Space is a perfect insulator. It is not cold. However, an object in space can be heated by the radiant heat of the sun, which can travel through a vacuum, although it does not affect the vacuum. Remember, for something to be heated or cooled, there must be molecules present. Radiation of all types will travel through a vacuum, but will not affect that vacuum. Radiant heat from the sun travels through the vacuum of space, but does not warm space. In fact, the radiant heat of the sun has no effect whatsoever until it strikes matter. Molecular movement will increase in direct proportion to the radiant energy which is absorbed by matter. The time it takes to heat matter exposed to direct sunlight in space is determined by its color, its elemental properties, its distance from the sun, and its rate of absorption of radiant heat energy. In other words, an object in space will absorb the radiant heat energy of the sun and will be heated until its temperature becomes equal to the radiant heat that it is absorbing. The side of the object that is in shadow will not be cooled by the so-called, quote, cold of space, end quote, NASA's lie that it has perpetrated for all of these years. It does not happen. Heat will spread through any object, through contact of molecule against molecule, until the heat of the object all over the object has become equal, ladies and gentlemen. Now understand what I just told you. Objects which are heated cannot be cooled by space. In order for an object to cool, it must first be removed from direct sunlight, and then it will stay at the temperature that it is at for quite a long time, until the molecular motion slows down through the resistance of molecules vibrating against each other, until all motion stops if the object is kept out of direct sunlight for a long enough period of time. Objects which are in the shadow of another object will eventually cool, but not because space is cold. Space is not cold. Space has no temperature whatsoever. Space is a perfect insulator. Hot and cold do not exist in the vacuum of space, or in any vacuum for that matter. Objects cool because the laws of motion dictate that the molecules of the object will slow down due to the resistance resulting from striking other molecules until eventually all motion will stop, provided the object is sheltered from the direct and/or indirect radiation of the sun and that there is no other source of heat. And this process takes quite a long time. NASA insists the spacesuits the astronauts supposedly wore on the lunar surface were air-conditioned. An air conditioner cannot and will not work without a heat exchanger. A heat exchanger, ladies and gentlemen, simply takes heat gathered in a medium such as Freon from one place and transfers it to another place. Water can be used. Air can be used. Anything that will conduct heat can be used for this process. This requires a medium of molecules which can absorb and transfer the heat, such as the atmosphere or water. An air conditioner will not and cannot work in a vacuum. NASA, in fact, says that their air conditioning works by a system of tubes which carry water all around the body, all throughout the spacesuit, and to a heat exchanger, which is cooled by ejecting water onto coils which freeze because of the cold of space, and then the water on the coils absorbs the heat from the water in the coils and then evaporates into space. Does not happen, ladies and gentlemen. It is another lie. Such a system might work in the atmosphere of the Earth, but it will not work in the vacuum of space. In fact, if you look at the videotapes, the good videotapes of the astronauts walking around in their spacesuits, you will see no tubes of heat exchangers of any kind and no ice formed on their backpacks anywhere at any time, which means if such a heat exchanger exists, it must exist underneath the backpack, and there must be an opening there so that the ice can have contact with the vacuum of space. When you watch the astronauts bend over, you will see that there is no opening on the bottom of their backpack. NASA has lied to us again. There is no heat exchanger. There is no way that the spacesuits can be cooled surrounded by a vacuum in space, ladies and gentlemen. Not only that, but even if they had a heat exchanger that was hidden in the backpack and was somehow open to the vacuum of space so that ice could evaporate, NASA has proved themselves a liar through their own words by stating that they have found ice in the shadowed portions of craters that are never lit by the light of the sun. Ice that has been there for millions, maybe billions of years. So NASA themselves have told us that ice will not evaporate into the vacuum of space. NASA has lied once again. An air conditioner will not and cannot work in a vacuum. A spacesuit surrounded by a vacuum cannot transfer heat from the inside of the suit to any other place. The vacuum, remember, is a perfect insulator. A man would roast in his suit like a hot dog in such a circumstance. The same laws of physics apply to any vehicle traveling through space. How did they cool the vehicle? Traveling through space, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, honey. My little daughter just got home and brought something in to show to me. The same laws of physics, ladies and gentlemen, apply to any vehicle traveling through space. NASA says they solved the problem of heat buildup in the space vehicle traveling from the Earth to the Moon, which you'll remember took several days, by slowly rotating the spacecraft so that as one side was heated, this is exactly what they tell us, as one side is heated, it slowly rotates into the shadow side where it is cooled by the sub-zero temperatures of space. Another lie. Remember, space is a vacuum. It is a perfect insulator. The only thing that NASA could accomplish by slowly rotating the vehicle as it traveled through space would be to roast the astronauts evenly all the way through from all sides, just like a hot dog or a turkey on a spit. Do you understand what I'm telling you? There is no way to cool that spacecraft traveling through space, and the way that NASA does it, or the way that NASA has told us that they did it, is a lie. It is a lie. Remember, they told us that the spacecraft is slowly rotating as it travels through space. And as one side is heated to the tremendous temperatures caused by the radiant heat of the sun, it slowly rotates into the shadow side. It's always rotating, so it doesn't stay there very long. But NASA claims that it was cooled by the sub-zero temperatures of space. It is a lie. If the spacecraft was cooled by the sub-zero temperatures of space, why isn't your coffee cooled in the sub-zero temperatures of the vacuum that surrounds your coffee in a vacuum bottle? Because there is no temperature in a vacuum, and that's exactly what keeps your coffee hot, ladies and gentlemen. NASA has lied to us. NASA and the Apollo space program is one of the biggest hoaxes ever perpetrated. And this is just one of over 100 valid scientific reasons why NASA and the Apollo space program are two of the biggest lies ever foisted upon the unsuspecting and trusting people of the world. The head of NASA at the time of the Apollo space program, Mr. Kleindienst, was rewarded for his ability to hoodwink the world. He is now the Grand Commander of the Council of the 33rd Degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry of the Southern Jurisdiction. In other words, he's the boss of almost all of the Freemasons in the world. All of the astronauts were Freemasons. All of them, ladies and gentlemen. There's a photograph in the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. of Neil Armstrong on the moon's surface, supposedly. We know that he really was not there when this photograph was taken. In his spacesuit, holding his Masonic apron in front of his groin. The effect upon the people of the world was that if we could go to the moon, other creatures from other worlds could travel to our Earth, especially an advanced race of other creatures. The escalation of the artificial alien threat scenario since that time has been and continues to be extremely obvious. After hearing this broadcast, you should go back and watch Independence Day again and listen very carefully to all of the dialogue, especially that spoken by the President and some of the other leaders of the world. A result, ladies and gentlemen, of the Genome Project at Los Alamos National Laboratory, the recent success of cloning and advances in biochemistry will produce laboratory-created creatures that will ultimately be presented to the people of the world as extraterrestrial in origin. The only reason an extraterrestrial has not been presented to humanity is that they have not yet succeeded in making one that is believable. For an in-depth explanation of this artificial alien threat scenario, read the report from Iron Mountain, The Probability and Possibility of Permanent Peace. The whole scenario is outlined in that study. A propaganda decoy has been presented by socialist change agents known to you as William Moore, Jamie Chandray, and Stanton T. Friedman. It is called Operation Majestic 12. It has succeeded in leading the sheeple, especially the ufologists for a while anyway, away from the truth by presenting the artificial alien threat as a government cover-up, and that aliens are real. Most of the well-known ufologists and so-called UFO researchers are Illuminati socialists or government change agents operating in furtherance of propagandizing the American people. Ruby Ridge, Waco, the attack against patriots and militias and other acts of aggression against the American people who might discover and combat this fraud are acts of war. They are designed to demonize fundamentalist Christians, Jews, Muslims, members of the Mormon Church, other religious fundamentalist organizations, the lawful constitutional militia described in the statutes and the United States Code, and anyone else who might fight in defense of the Constitution and our liberty and freedom. These terrorist acts deliver a message to the American people and to the people of the world that any opposition to the New World super-government will be met with overwhelming force and the complete genocide of the enemies of socialism. The World Trade Center bombing, the bombing of the Oklahoma City Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, and mass shootings by mental and ex-mental patients of large numbers of men, women, and children in Stockton, California, and the most recent one, were and will continue to be intentional acts of war designed to spread terror and a feeling of helplessness. Most of the ex or current mental patients who have perpetrated these acts are in fact innocent victims of mind control projects that are in activation to further the interests of this socialist New World Order. In my book, Behold a Pale Horse, I predicted that the first major terrorist attack upon the United States would take place in New York City. I was correct. I said that it would not stop there, and I've said on this broadcast that it would not stop there, that it would spread, and that these attacks and these shootings would continue until the American people get down on their knees and beg their slave masters to disarm them so that they can be more easily and more quickly enslaved. And the sheeple are following for it, hook, line, and sinker. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, and it is a fact, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, orchestrated the attack upon the World Trade Center, teaching the terrorists how to drive the van. They taught the terrorists how to build the bomb. They placed it in the building and detonated the bomb. One of the Federal Bureau of Investigation informants attempted to secure permission from the FBI to substitute inert ingredients for the bomb so that no one would be injured. But the Federal Bureau of Investigation agent in charge denied the request. The informant tape recorded every single one of his conversations. That's right, it is a combination. He recorded all of his conversations with the FBI, and a full transcript of the tapes were printed in the New York Times. The judge refused to allow the tapes to be presented in court in defense of the FBI informant. Confederate would be a much better word. The attack on the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building was designed to affect the heartland. It was designed, ladies and gentlemen, to affect the heartland so that no one in the nation will feel safe. These acts, in the manner of Hegel's dialectic, are leading to a need for the elimination of the rights of individuals and the disarmament of all peoples so that the world super-government can step up to provide the solution, which will be artificial safety and security from terrorism, something that no one can ever guarantee. But the sheeple will believe it. Thesis against antithesis equals synthesis. The Omnibus Counterterrorism Act, which followed, gave the President the power to arrest, imprison, and or deport any political opposition without trial, without habeas corpus, and without explanation of any kind. It in fact gave him the power to name any group a terrorist group, thus setting the stage for the arrest, detention, imprisonment without benefit of habeas corpus, without benefit of any kind of trial, with a possible result of deportation to a foreign country, and without explanation to anybody, by anybody. And I'm here to tell you, if these acts of terror do not succeed, there will be more bombings. There will be chemical or biological attacks. They will escalate in the destruction, maiming, and killing of men, women, and especially children. As a last resort, if all else fails, the Illuminati are prepared, and I'm going to tell you this again so that you understand it, as a last resort, if all else fails, believing completely that the ends justify the means, the Illuminati are prepared to detonate an atomic weapon in a large American city such as New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles. A war may be promulgated in the Middle East in order to provide the excuse needed to explain terrorist attacks upon the United States of America to the American sheeple in order that they will accept personal disarmament in the interest of peace and security. Now listen to this closely, and if you don't believe it, you check it, because all the documentation is in the public domain. Most of it has already been admitted by the United States government and has been published in the major newspapers of the nation. Saddam Hussein was trained by the Central Intelligence Agency. Saddam Hussein was put in power in Iraq by the Central Intelligence Agency under George Herbert Walker Bush, who later became the President of the United States of America, and led the United States in a war called Desert Storm against Saddam Hussein and Iraq, making sure that no harm came to Saddam Hussein. The United States armed Iraq and gave Saddam Hussein the technology and scientific knowledge to create weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein functions as the big boogeyman of the world, or the Antichrist, if you will, and the stage was set in a film narrated by the same man who on the Mercury Theater presented The War of the Worlds in 1938, called The Late Great Planet Earth, in which an Antichrist was presented as a man from the Muslim world. Incredibly, ladies and gentlemen, in this film, he looks exactly like Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein functions as the Antichrist, or the big boogeyman of the world, so that the United Nations can cement its authority over the so-called sovereign nations, which, by the way, are not sovereign anymore. And that is why Saddam Hussein was not killed during the Gulf War, and that's why he won't be killed in any future Gulf War. His purpose is to function as an Antichrist to create terror in the minds of the sheeple of the world. The answer, of course, will be the destruction of national sovereignty worldwide, the establishment of a one-world socialist government under the United Nations, disarmament of all nations, and the establishment of a world police force. The terrorist attacks, ladies and gentlemen, which will be launched in the United States will be blamed upon Middle Eastern religious fanatics, Christian fundamentalists, white supremacists, patriots, or militias. A more immediate result of these operations will be the increased use of military forces, weaponry, and equipment such as tanks and armored personnel carriers in civilian law enforcement. The suspension or elimination of habeas corpus, the elimination of jury trials, and the institution of martial law with show trials conducted by a tribunal of judges. When you continue to hear this constitutional republic referred to as a democracy, you must remember that V.I. Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union, said, quote, "Democracy is indispensable to socialism," end quote. When you hear our military referred to as UN peacekeepers, remember that both Karl Marx and Lenin defined peace as, quote, "the elimination of all opposition to socialism," end quote. When you wonder where all this is taking us, remember that both Marx and Lenin stated that, quote, "the ultimate goal of socialism is communism," end quote. And if you think communism is dead, read Gorbachev's book, Perestroika, and he will tell you quite the opposite. But if you think the fall of the Soviet Union was the end of communism, read Golitsyn. And believe me when I tell you that the highest-ranking communist mole in the Central Intelligence Agency was James Jesus Angleton. The Turner Diaries, ladies and gentlemen, were actually written by the Central Intelligence Agency prior to 1972. The concept of leaderless resistance was promulgated to enable easy destruction of any resistance to the world super-government. Small, scattered units without a concerted tactical plan and a solid, reliable command structure will be defeated in a very short period of time. No such movement could ever effect the necessary political control to restore order and reinstitute government of any kind, even if they managed to win the war. Now let me say that again so that it sinks through some of the thick heads out there. The concept of leaderless resistance was promulgated to enable easy destruction of any resistance to the world super-government. The Turner Diaries also branded anyone who used such a tactic as racist terrorists. Small scattered units without a concerted tactical plan and a solid, reliable command structure will be defeated in a very short period of time. No such movement could ever effect the necessary political control to restore order and reinstitute government of any kind, even if they managed to win the war. Many of the so-called patriot leaders, such as Lieutenant Colonel James Bogreitz, Mark Kornke, John Stadtmiller, Kurt Saxon, and many others, are actually change agents of Illuminati socialism or the intelligence community. World War III is being fought now. It is being fought with information warfare using very sophisticated mind control techniques, propaganda, disinformation, intimidation, fear, and manipulation. It is, in fact, a usually quiet war being fought mostly with silent weapons. But before long, ladies and gentlemen, I guarantee you it will become very loud and very destructive. Ordo ab chao dictates that the old order be completely and thoroughly destroyed before the new order can be established. How do they do this? Well, many of you follow some of these change agents, believing that they're on your side, looking up to them as heroes, thinking that they're telling you the truth. But, ladies and gentlemen, nothing could be farther from the truth. One of the greatest Trojan horses ever presented to the American people has been Lieutenant Colonel James Bogreitz. Now, this is written by Bogreitz. Nothing is invented here. I'm going to read you a letter that he wrote in response to an editorial printed in the Hartford Advocate. This letter was written by Bogreitz to the Hartford Advocate as a reply. And I'm only going to read you the portions of it that apply to this broadcast because it's a long, long letter. He says, quote, "The 17 October edition of the Hartford Advocate's Conspiracy of Hate was indeed just that, but devoid of fact. Since its release, outraged Americans have faxed and mailed me copies from all over the United States. It is unfortunate that the Advocate printed this extensive cover article without so much as a phone call to me. This was irresponsible and insupportable journalism, unless the purpose of the publication is to provide the public with fish wrap. The article cast me as a militia-leading, government-hating, anti-Semitic racist supporter of the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis, all of which is a blatant lie. In accordance with United States Codes 10 and 32, which define the unorganized militia, let me say that again so that there's no mistake here, which define the unorganized militia as a regular, listen to me very carefully, he makes a confession here, as a regular United States Army officer on retainer with hip pocket orders, I cannot be a member of any militia. I neither belong to nor lead any such organization. Neither do I support fear of black helicopters, United Nations, or extraterrestrial invasions. I have steadfastly done everything in my power to dissuade anarchist militia activity and debunk people who advocate violence." Now, what's important there, ladies and gentlemen, is that he has been telling us for years that he resigned his commission as a regular United States Army officer. He lied. Here he admits he is a regular United States Army officer on retainer with hip pocket orders, which means, ladies and gentlemen, he is an undercover agent of the United States government. He has lied about his religion. to Pete Peters, he said he was a member of the Christian Identity Church. Do you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen? That's British Israelism. Those are the people who believe that they are the true Israel and that every other race is inferior to them and that they are destined to rule the world. Grites goes on to say, quote, I am a member of the Jewish Defense League's San Francisco chapter. I believe the fate of America is linked to Israel. For that reason, I am a long-time The Forward subscriber. Now, if you don't know what the Jewish Defense League is, ladies and gentlemen, it is a militant, racist arm of international Zionism. It is not a normal Jewish organization. Most Jews in this world are just like all other people. They don't know what the hell's going on any more than any of us ever did before we did our research or before, like me, got placed in a position where we discovered it and then spent many years researching to find out what it all meant. He says, quote, I am a member of the Jewish Defense League's San Francisco chapter, end quote. This is the same man who told the people in Sedona, Arizona, that he's tried all the different churches and never found one that he could believe in. I bet he didn't tell that to the church that he's been a member of for many years, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One day on his radio program, he even told everybody that he had left the Mormon Church, didn't want to be a member of it anymore, didn't believe in its religion, and then began on the radio talking about how he had sent his son for past life regression and how he believed in reincarnation and all of the New Age movement things. This is how he trolls for people to follow him. Whoever you are, he will be whatever you are in order to get you to follow him so that he can find out who you are and what you're doing and where you live, so that when all this comes down, anyone who would dare fight against the New World Order can be rounded up and imprisoned. And when the key is turned in the lock, it will be Lieutenant Colonel James Bogrites who turns that key. If you read the letter, and you can find it on my webpage, harvest-trust.org, that's harvest-trust.org. When you read the letter to the editor, written by Lieutenant Colonel James Bogrites, please note the admissions contained therein. He states that he became a cadet in 1953 and entered active Army service in 1957. He admits that he is now, at this time, as I speak, a regular United States Army officer on retainer with hip pocket orders. In other words, he is an undercover agent of the United States government. Yet he has claimed on many occasions that he resigned his commission. If he had resigned his commission, as he has claimed, why is he always in uniform and or pictured in uniform? You want to know? Because most of the sheeple are suckers for a uniform and a chest full of ribbons. Grites is working for the Department of Defense and the United States government right now. He admits membership in the Jewish Defense League. He openly admits that he is a Zionist. He has claimed to be a Mormon, Christian identity, Christian, and during one memorable moment while lecturing in Sedona, Arizona, Grites claimed to have tried all religions, but had never found one in which he could believe. There is nothing, folks, listen to me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being in the military or with being a member of the Jewish Defense League. There is, however, a great deal wrong with lying to the American people. There is nothing wrong with being a member of the Mormon Church. There is nothing wrong with being a member of the Christian Identity Church. There is nothing wrong with being an atheist and saying that he's never found a religion that he can believe in, if that is true and if he's being honest with everybody. I believe in freedom, and we all have the freedom to belong to whatever organization or whatever church we want to belong to. And I have served in the military service of the United States of America, first in the Air Force and then in the Navy. So understand that I am not criticizing him for these things. What I am criticizing him for is lying to the American people, repeatedly lying over and over and over again, while all the time he is a paid undercover agent of the United States government, by his own admission. Now, Zionists believe they are a superior race, chosen by God to rule the world in a one-world government with the capital in Jerusalem. Zionists believe all other people are inferior. Zionism is Christian identity, British Israelism, and a radical branch of Judaism. Most Zionists are white Christians and Orthodox Messianic Jews. Most Jews are not Orthodox, are not Zionists, but are secular in their religious beliefs. Harvest Trust, over the years, and our investigations, have determined that Grice is a 32nd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of the Southern jurisdiction. His photograph appeared on one of the covers of a very prominent Patriot magazine. On his hand, he is wearing the ring of the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. He is an FBI informant. When he was called to help the FBI at Ruby Ridge, he was called by the FBI and was working for the FBI and wore a wire the whole time in every conversation that he had with Randy Weaver. He is an active undercover agent for the Special Operations Group of the Department of Defense as an integral member of a project called Trojan Horse. Now remember, you heard all this from William Cooper years ago, and you're hearing it again because now we have it in his own words in a letter that he wrote, which we got off of his webpage. And just to make sure that we were doing the right thing, we got a copy from the newspaper which he wrote it to and who printed it on their editorial page. World War III is being fought now. It is being fought with information warfare, using very sophisticated mind control techniques, propaganda, disinformation, intimidation, fear, and manipulation. It is, in fact, a usually quiet war being fought mostly with silent weapons. But before long, it will become very loud and very destructive. Ordo ab chao is the motto of the higher degrees of this order, and it dictates that the old order be completely and thoroughly destroyed before the new order can be established. A one-world socialist government is the stated and avowed policy of the United States government. The United States created the United Nations. The United States State Department wrote the policy in the document known as State Department Publication 7277, which includes an introduction by President Truman, 33rd degree Freemason, which admits the United States government's world government policy. State Department Publication 7277 outlines the merger of the military of the United States with the military of the Eastern Bloc nations as a world peacekeeping force under the United Nations as the ultimate goal of the foreign policy of the United States of America. I didn't make any of this up, and everything that you have been told on yesterday's broadcast and today's broadcast is thoroughly documented. NATO is a part of the United Nations and was created under its auspices according to the United Nations Charter. The Warsaw Pact was a part of the United Nations and was created under its auspices according to the United Nations Charter. The Cold War was a scam which allowed both governments to levy large taxes which were used to develop the technology and experiment with techniques which will be combined to control the population of the world. The inclusion of Warsaw Pact nations as new members of NATO is the initial stage of Phase 2 of the merger of forces outlined in State Department Publication 7277, which will become the World Police Force under the United Nations. President Kennedy presented the plan to disarm the nations and people of the world to the United Nations. The United States planted the seed of an European Union, nurtured that idea, and has supported its formation. When the leader of the old Soviet Union banged his shoe on his desk at the United Nations and screamed, quote, "We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within," end quote, he was telling us the truth. The progression of accomplishments toward the completion of the plan to implement one world socialist totalitarian government is guided and controlled by the hierarchy of the Illuminati and the groups known as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Round Table Group, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and many others, including the Illuminati in government and industry, who are members of the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of the southern and northern jurisdictions. the Supreme Council of the York Rite of Freemasonry, International Zionism, B'nai B'rith, the Grand Lodge of France, the Grand Lodge of England, the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templi Orientalis, the Rossi Cruci, the Sovereign and Military Order of the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, the Jason Society, the Vatican, and many others, too numerous to list. See the occult and other links on our homepage. You will be amazed. It's harvest-trust.org on the internet. I will finish this tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, because once again, we've run out of time. Good night, and God bless each and every one of you. And if I've scared you, good. It's about time somebody did. You're listening to a live broadcast of the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to cover the plan for world domination by the adepts of the hidden mystery religion, which is called Mystery Babylon. It is an ancient body of adepts of the highest degrees of all of the so-called fraternal orders and secret societies. They have been attempting over many hundreds of years to complete what they call the great work. And ladies and gentlemen, we're in the last days of their bringing to fruition the culmination of all of their machinations and intrigue and subterfuge and subversion over all of those years. The name of the plan, as I saw it when I was a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and specifically a member of the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, is Majesty 12. No separation between the two words. In other words, written as if it's all one word, in all capital letters. So don't go away. Make sure you have pen and paper by your side and pay very close attention.
Never in human history has so few taken so much from so many as America's Illuminati and their warlords of Wall Street and Washington. In just 8 years, these banksters and international government gangsters took us from the greatest creditor nation to the largest debtor nation on earth. Our standard of living has dropped like a rock for 4 out of every 5 Americans. They have foreclosed on our homes, our farms, our factories. They've exported your jobs and surrendered our arms. They want it. A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. The Illuminati wants you to be a slave from birth to grave. The banksters own the Federal Reserve. It's private. They own it. It's neither federal nor a reserve. The cashiers make that fiat funny money stuff you call dollars for 2 pennies. They lend it back to us at full face value. Then charge you interest. You get the debt. They get the interest. They get the gold. You get the shell. They want is a new world order.
Well, as we have done the day before, yesterday, I'm going to back up a little bit and repeat some of what you heard yesterday so that there is no misunderstanding. And just in case somebody new is tuning in, they won't get all of it because they've missed. They've missed the first 2 hours of this expose, but they will at least understand the topic of conversation today. In other words, we're not going to come right in the middle of something, ladies and gentlemen. If I sounded a little remote at the beginning of this broadcast, it's because the equipment here was not operating properly. And I was attempting to talk to you while half of my attention was trying to make sure that the equipment is operating correctly. So that's why I may have sounded a little distant in the beginning of this broadcast. Folks, make sure you have pen and paper. You're going to want to remember some of this. Many of you are probably so angry by now, you're certainly going to want to check up on all of it and prove me wrong. And I certainly encourage you to do that. And if anyone can prove me wrong on any of the information that I have given you over this broadcast, then I want to know about it, because I certainly want to check your proof. And I don't expect you to just call me and rail on me and say that I'm wrong. If you furnish me with proof and you're polite and responsible, I will certainly check out what you tell me or what you show me. And if you turn out to be right, folks, I will come on the air and will correct whatever mistake I have made. Nothing that I'm giving you is intended to mislead you. None of it is disinformation or false, according to all of the research that I've done and the documentation that I have, and what I saw while a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence many years ago, and specifically as a member of the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet. Everything that I'm telling you is absolutely true, correct, is documented and sourced, is the product of not only what I saw in the Navy, but many, many years of research, not only by me, but the members of all of the organizations which I head and other prominent researchers throughout the country and even the world. So this doesn't just come from me, ladies and gentlemen. It comes from many people. Many of us duplicate the research in order to make sure that we are correct. And you had better take heed, folks, because an awful lot of work, many years, a lot of risk and exposure to danger and hurt, terrible hurt, is the result of the information that we have discovered. Some of us have been attacked, beaten. Some of us have been killed. Some of us have been terribly slandered and libeled in order to keep the public from learning what I have been delivering to you over the last 2 days and will continue in this broadcast today. Most of you have no conception of what the reality of the world on a political and social and economic level really is. You're wrapped up in your families and in your work, and you think that that's all that you need to do because you've elected somebody that you trust and you've sent them off to represent you. And they will never do you wrong. And it can't happen here in the United States of America. But folks, you're wrong, and that's exactly why it is happening here, because whether you want to admit it or not, or whether you like it or not, you have abdicated your responsibility as the watchdog, as the sovereign citizen in this country. And so those who can be corrupted have been corrupted. Those who would not be corrupted have been framed, have been libeled, have been slandered, have been shunted to the side, shifted out of government over the years. This may shock you, ladies and gentlemen, but it is the truth. Listen to me very carefully. A one-world socialist government is the stated and avowed policy of the United States government. The United Nations didn't spring up out of some bubbling pool of goo back in some swamp somewhere. The United States created the United Nations. And if you don't believe that, you get into your history books and you'll find out that it's absolutely true. And the members of the United States government that we sent to create the United Nations and participate in the writing of the United Nations Charter later were arrested, tried, convicted, and were sent to prison as members of a subversive group of spies acting on behalf of the Soviet Union, members of the Communist Party, the most prominent, two of which were Mr. Chambers and Mr. Alger Hiss. The United States State Department wrote the policy in the document known as State Department Publication 7277, which for those of you who have not seen it, includes an introduction by President Truman, who was a 33rd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite, which admits the United States government's world government policy. State Department Publication 7277 further outlines the merger of the military of the United States with the military of the Eastern Bloc nations, what used to be known as the Warsaw Pact or the Soviet Union, as a world peacekeeping force under the United Nations as the ultimate goal of the foreign policy of the United States of America. NATO, that's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is a part of the United Nations. It is not a separate force, and it is not a force of the United States of America. NATO is a part of the United Nations and was created under its auspices according to the United Nations Charter and at the approval of the United Nations Security Council. It's all in the treaty, ladies and gentlemen, which you have never read. The Warsaw Pact was also a part of the United Nations and was also created under its auspices according to the United Nations Charter. The Cold War was a scam perpetrated between two military organizations, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, in order to create a diversion, an illusion, if you will. You see, they both belong to the same organization, the United Nations. They were both overseen, run by, and ruled by the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. There was never any danger of war between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. The Cold War, in fact, was a scam which allowed both governments to levy large taxes which were used to develop the technology and experiment with techniques which will be combined to control the population of the world. The inclusion of Warsaw Pact nations as new members of NATO today, now, as I speak, is the initial stage of Phase 2 of the merger of forces outlined in State Department Publication 7277. And the purpose, the real purpose, for the illusion of the fall of the Soviet Union was so this could be brought about and so that the West could be deceived into disarming. President Kennedy presented the plan to disarm the nations and people of the world to the United Nations. The United States planted the seed of an European Union, nurtured that idea, and has supported its formation. When the leader of the USSR banged his shoe on his desk at the United Nations and screamed, quote, "We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within," end quote, he was absolutely correct. Those of you alive at the time who were watching television and reading your newspapers and paying attention know that that was Nikita Khrushchev who made that statement and banged his shoe on that desk. The progression of accomplishments toward the completion of the plan to implement one world socialist totalitarian government is guided and controlled by the hierarchy of the Illuminati in the groups known as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Round Table Group, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and many others, including the Illuminati adepts in government and industry who are members of the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, of the Southern and Northern Jurisdiction, the Supreme Council of the York Rite of Freemasonry, International Zionism, B'nai B'rith, the Grand Lodge of France, the Grand Lodge of England, the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templi Orientalis, the Rossi Cruci, the Sovereign and Military Order of the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, the Jason Society, the Vatican, and many others too numerous to list. And if you want to see a list of all of these secret organizations, which will literally blow your mind, and you can go directly to their sites on the Internet and read their own teachings and writings and philosophy and goals and everything else, go to our webpage, which is harvest-trust.org. That's harvest-trust.org. You don't need www. It's just http://harvest-trust.org. Click on the occult link on our homepage, and when you're finished there, click on the Secret Societies link in the occult page, and you will see that these organizations are so numerous, it will absolutely amaze you, especially those of you who have always thought that these secret societies were some kind of popular myth and they don't really exist and they don't really do these things. Well, folks, most of them admit it in their own words, and you can read it yourself, so just do that. There are other links on our homepage and on our website that you will also be interested in. The American public is being bombarded with propaganda to enable them to accept the New World Order, give up their Constitution and their Bill of Rights and their heritage as Americans, and become citizen slaves in this New World socialist utopian state. These propaganda attacks become obvious, with people like Mr. Leavitt and Mr. Harris are arrested and falsely charged by the Gestapo murderers who orchestrated the World Trade Center, the Waco massacre, the Ruby Ridge murder of Vicki Weaver by an FBI sniper, the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, of the Federal Bureau of Investigation with planning an anthrax attack. This is recent, and this is why I cite it, so that you can see how your minds are screwed around by these people. The Marxist press immediately mounted a vicious campaign of lies against these two men. They were accused of being white supremacist militia members who were followers of Christian identity who planned to launch an anthrax attack upon New York City. Well, folks, that was impossible because Mr. Leavitt is Jewish, and he's not any of those things. And Mr. Harris is not any of those things either. The truth is that they were attempting to manufacture a vaccine which could be used to protect the general population from just such an attack. The fact is that the so-called deadly biological anthrax weapon, which they were supposed to have, was the very vaccine which they had developed in order to protect the public from the biological attacks which we know will eventually come. Mr. Harris is a microbiologist. This is not the first time that they have tried to put him in prison on false charges, ladies and gentlemen. They don't want us to have protection against what they also know is coming. Now, why do they do this when ultimately they have to admit the truth? It's because most people are not people at all, ladies and gentlemen. They've never had an original thought in their life, and they don't think. They listen and believe whatever they are told because they have been indoctrinated to behave in that manner. So when it was eventually announced that these men had to be released because what they were carrying was in fact not a deadly anthrax germ, and not that they were going to kill people with it, but that it was a harmless vaccine, when they finally had to admit that, ladies and gentlemen, nobody listened to that. The only thing that most of the sheeple in this country and around the world will remember is that two men were arrested in Las Vegas with a deadly anthrax germ, a biological weapon, with which they were going to attack and kill hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people. It was all a lie. And this happens all the time, ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember the attack upon the patriots? The people who love this country and would be willing to give their life in defense of the Constitution for the United States of America, and have always been the ones who have fought and died for freedom and for this country throughout the history of the United States of America. Do you remember that right after the Oklahoma City bombing, remember the vicious Marxist press attacks against these people and against the lawful and constitutionally organized militia in this nation, which have been a part of this nation, which are spelled out in the law, which have fought most of the battles of this nation throughout the history of the United States of America, were responsible for freeing the slaves in the Civil War, were the ones who fought the revolution to create the United States of America? Do you know why these people are being attacked, ladies and gentlemen? Even though eventually the Federal Bureau of Investigation admitted in a press conference that patriots and militia members were not involved in the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, most of you still think that they were. And the press still tries to hammer that in, to make you believe it. Just last Sunday, ladies and gentlemen, on CNN, they did a special, ladies and gentlemen, about a man in Utah who would not stop for a police officer, a man who has a long history of being a Nazi, a real Nazi, and of making statements that he would love to kill the FBI and all kinds of other things. They did a special on him, and they left you with the impression that he is a patriot militia member. American patriots are not Nazis, ladies and gentlemen. American patriots do not act like this man does. This was intentional propaganda. He is not a part of any militia in this country. And I can tell you that with absolute certainty because I am one of the top leaders of the militia in this country. In fact, I am the director of the intelligence service of the Second Continental Army of the Republic Militia. The Marxist press and the communist news networks are constantly bombarding the American people with lies and propaganda in order to demonize real Americans, to demonize American patriots, to demonize the American militia, so that you're all eventually afraid to support the causes and the principles and ideals that you were taught to support as a child growing up, that you know is the right thing to do, but now has become politically incorrect. Why? Because the United States of America is scheduled to disappear into one of the 10 regions of the New World Order. The Constitution will become a dim memory in the minds of all of us. And the new history books will make no mention of liberty or freedom. Our constitutions are bills of rights, our creators. Even the word God will disappear. Politicians, ladies and gentlemen, are controlled through the accumulation of dossiers by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by the way, which has absolutely no constitutional foundation or authorization for its existence. The Internal Revenue Service, which is a legal fiction, which does not exist as an agency of the United States government or as an agency of the Department of the Treasury. If you don't believe me, check the United States Code for the organization of the Department of the Treasury or the organization of the entire United States government. You will not find the Internal Revenue Service listed anywhere as a part of any organization of the United States government or as an agency of the United States government. The Central Intelligence Agency, the Mossad, MI6, which is British Foreign Intelligence, the Anti-Defamation League of the secret society known as B'nai B'rith, the KGB, and other Illuminati-controlled organizations. These dossiers are used to blackmail these politicians into towing the line. Those who do not have incidents in their past that allow control by blackmail are put in positions by one or more of the above organizations that know how to manipulate human nature better than you can possibly even imagine. And it results in one or more incidents which will allow control by blackmail of these people. If they step out of line even once, something is handed to the press or brought out on the news that causes that person tremendous embarrassment and could, and sometimes does, result in the end of their political career. The Las Vegas brothel, run by Bob Lazar, Robert Lazar, was found to have video cameras throughout and was used for the collection of information with which to blackmail politicians, military personnel, and anyone else who needed to be controlled by the Illuminati. Anyone who will not play by the Illuminati rules are weeded out and quickly disappear from politics. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that it was 33rd degree Freemason Franklin Delano Roosevelt who created the Federal Bureau of Investigation, instituted the first run of socialism in this country. The FBI was run by 33rd degree Freemason J. Edgar Hoover. The FBI and the Internal Revenue Service are, in fact, the political Gestapo for the Illuminati in the United States of America. The end result of all of this will be the destruction of the sovereignty, Constitution of the United States of America, and the formation of a world totalitarian socialist government. All those in and out of government who support the policy of one world government are knowingly and willingly engaged in high treason. Regardless of what you have ever been led to believe, listen to me carefully. Senator Joseph McCarthy was absolutely correct. And in fact, the recent opening of the files of the KGB proved that he even knew the exact number of communist agents who had infiltrated our government. The revelations of history, the records of the KGB, and the recent release of the National Security Agency's deciphered cables to and from Moscow by the Venona Project have vindicated Senator Joseph McCarthy. He was destroyed by the Marxist-owned and controlled news media and Hollywood. The branding of anyone who dared to expose communists and their goal of the ultimate destruction of the United States of America as McCarthyites ensured the opening of our government to the subversive agents. Infiltration and rapid takeover of our government took place by Marxists and communists over the intervening years, and they are in control today. And listen to this very carefully. Those of you, ladies and gentlemen, who believe so strongly in the book of Revelation in the King James Version of the Holy Bible and other religious and are superstitious people who believe in prophecies of Nostradamus and many others and think that you really have deciphered all of these things and you know exactly what's going to happen and when, you are being intentionally led into a state called millennium fever, so that you will offer no opposition to the New World Order while you calmly await the workings of the hand of God and the arrival on this earth of whoever your particular Messiah happens to be. And oh, they're going to give you a Messiah. Oh, yes, they are. And we covered that in a previous episode. Your philosophy is you're not going to lift a favor no matter what happens. You're not going to do anything because you believe that it's all being brought about by the hand of God. And that you know this because you have read the inspired prophetic revelation of God. But apparently, and especially if you're a Christian, you don't even read or understand the teachings of the man you purport to follow. Jesus said this, and I'm paraphrasing it, but I'm absolutely accurate, that when you think He is coming, He will not be here. He said He would come like a thief in the night, and even the elect will be fooled. Well, ladies and gentlemen, fools abound. I see books all over the place purporting to be explaining to you what's going to happen in the near future, deciphered from the prophecies of Nostradamus. all telling you what I'm telling you, but telling you that you cannot resist it because it is the fulfilled prophecy, the prophetic revelation of God. Well, it's not. It's being brought about by flesh and blood men who are creating events to make you believe that it is the fulfilled prophetic revelation of God, so that you will be rendered impotent, harmless. You will not lift a finger against what is coming. Nostradamus wrote his quatrains in a code which has never, ever been deciphered by anyone. Never. Understand that. Remember what Jesus said. Even the elect will be fooled. That is also repeated in the book of Revelations. Even the elect will be fooled. And I know that most of you think you're the elect, and I can tell you right now, you have definitely been fooled. And there's more, ladies and gentlemen, much, much more, as you will come to realize on your own over the coming months and years, especially if you have listened to these broadcasts beginning Monday and continuing through today. You will be able to recognize things now that you could not recognize before. The news will make more sense to you, and you will begin to understand what's happening in the world and why. You wonder how all this comes about. Well, it's pretty simple, folks. And if you don't believe me, believe the President of the United States of America, President Woodrow Wilson. He said this, quote, "There is a power so organized, so subtle, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it," end quote. Woodrow Wilson said that, President of the United States, trying to give us some idea of what is happening. Those of you who think that history is boring, you're going to find the future extremely exciting because you thought history was boring, because those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. History is replete with whispers of secret societies, accounts of elders or priests who guarded the forbidden knowledge of ancient peoples, prominent men meeting in secret who directed the course of civilization are recorded in the writings of all people. Plato spoke of his initiation in the Great Pyramid at Giza, where he went in and came out a god. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The oldest of these is the Brotherhood of the Snake, also called the Brotherhood of the Dragon, and it still exists under many different names. The Brotherhood of the Snake is devoted to guarding the, quote, secrets of the ages, end quote, and to the recognition of Lucifer as the one and only true God. Now, of course, that's a metaphor, ladies and gentlemen. If you do not believe in God, Lucifer, or Satan, you must understand that there are great masses of people who do, and who believe in and follow the metaphor which they represent. I don't believe in racism, but millions do, and their beliefs and actions based upon those beliefs will always affect me. Especially me, because I'm married to a Chinese woman, and we are the brunt, the target of racist attacks. We know all about it. And whether I believe in it or not, it still affects me, because somebody else does. So don't dismiss something because you don't believe in it. If somebody else believes in it strongly, especially a lot of people, it's going to affect you, especially if they come in to any power whatsoever. It is clear, ladies and gentlemen, that religion has always played a significant role in the course of these organizations. The secrets of these groups, they say, are thought to be so profound that only a chosen, well-educated few are able to understand and use them. These men use their special knowledge for the benefit of mankind. At least that is what they claim. But if you follow their machinations throughout the history of the world, you'll find that death and destruction follows their manipulation of the human race. I can find no benefit. Only death, destruction, pain, suffering, tears, and poverty. And how can we take their word for anything, since their knowledge and actions are secret? Fortunately, folks, due to people who diligently research and dig, people like me and many others, some of it has become public knowledge. I found it intriguing that in most, if not all, primitive tribal societies, all of the adults are members of secret societies. They are usually separated into male and female groups. The male usually dominates the culture. Surprisingly, this exactly resembles many civilized secret societies. It can only mean that the society is working not against established authority, but for it. In fact, could be said to actually be the established authority. And I'm going to tell you that today that is absolutely correct. This would tend to cause some to remove the validity of any argument that all secret associations are dedicated to the destruction of properly constituted authority. This can only apply, of course, where the secret society makes up the majority or entirety of any people which it affects, but only a very few fall into this category. It does not apply to us. Secret societies, ladies and gentlemen, in fact, mirror many facets of ordinary life. There is always an exclusivity of membership, with the resultant importance attached to being or becoming a member. Remember high school? Remember the popular clique? This is found in all human endeavors, even those which are not secret, such as football teams or country clubs. This exclusivity of membership is actually, ladies and gentlemen, one of the secret society's most powerful weapons. There is the use of signs, passwords, and other tools. These have always performed valuable functions in man's organizations everywhere. The stated reason almost always different from the real reason for the society's existence is important. It can be anything, but is usually fraternal and is found in all pressure groups wherever people congregate. Members of the clique or the brotherhood receive special favor. They receive contracts when others do not. They win legal battles in courts of law, sometimes apparently for no lawful reason. The comradeship is especially important. Sharing hardships or secrets has always been a special thrill to man. It's why gossip spreads throughout a neighborhood or a community so quickly. No one who has ever undergone the rigors of a military boot camp is ever likely to forget the special feeling of belonging and comradeship that was shared between the victims of the drill sergeant or company commander. It is an emotion born of initiation. The most potent tool of any secret society is the ritual and myth surrounding initiation. It is also a teaching tool, but only for those who can decipher the specific meaning of the symbols involved in the rituals. These special binding ceremonies have very deep meaning and cause a long-lasting bond between the participants. Initiation performs several functions which make up the heart and soul of any true secret society. Like a military boot camp, the initiation into the armed forces, important aspects of human thought that are universally compelling are merged to train and maintain the efforts of a group of people to operate in a certain specific direction. Initiation bonds the members together in mysticism. Neophytes gain knowledge of a secret, giving them special status, they think. The ancient meaning of neophyte is planted anew or reborn. A higher initiation is in reality a promotion, inspiring loyalty and the desire to move up to the next rung. The goals of the society are reinforced, causing the initiated to act toward those goals in everyday life. That, ladies and gentlemen, that brings about a change in the political and social action of the member. The change is always in the best interest of the goals of the leaders of the secret society. These leaders are known as adepts, or priests. This can best be illustrated by the soldier who is trained to follow orders without thinking. The result is often the wounding or death of the soldier for the realization of the commander's goal, which may or may not be good for the overall community, and certainly was not any good for the soldier. Initiation, ladies and gentlemen, is a means of rewarding ambitious men who can be trusted. You will notice that the higher the degree of initiation, the fewer the members who possess the degree. This is not because the other members are not ambitious, but because a process of very careful selection is being conducted. A point is reached where no effort is good enough without a pull-up by the higher members. Most members never proceed beyond this point and never ever learn the real secret purpose of the group. The frozen member from that point on serves only as a part of the political power base, as indeed he has always done. You may have guessed by now that initiation is a way to determine who can and cannot be trusted, who can understand the symbolic education given to them, and who wants to be a part of the goals of the order. The mystery is that religion is but a tool to control the masses. Knowledge or wisdom is their only God, through which they believe man himself will become God. If they believe that and they profess to be a Christian or to believe in Jesus or in the God of the Bible, the Christian Bible, they are unbelievably arrogant in making this statement. They're also in complete and total rebellion to God. For what did God say? He said, "There is no other God but this God." You'd better read your Bible if you're a Christian and you believe that someday you're going to become a God. If you're a member of these secret societies and you profess to be a Christian, you cannot be both, because one is a lie and the other is the truth. No part, ladies and gentlemen. If you believe that there is a God, you must believe that if there was nothing in the beginning, and God created everything that there is, the only thing that there was to create everything with was God. So therefore, each individual human being must have, and as Jesus said on more than one occasion, a part of that divine substance within. That has to be the case if you believe that in the beginning there was nothing except God, and He created everything from what there was, which is Himself. But understand this: no part can ever be equal to or greater than the whole. No small portion can ever stand up to be equal to or to be God. Understand that. And I don't care who you are, if you really believe that you're going to become God, as man, according to the philosophy, the Luciferian philosophy of the mystery schools, you have deluded yourself. You have been deluded. And someday you're going to understand just exactly how much you've been deluded. Shirley MacLaine ran along the beach, shouting into the wind, "I am God." Ladies and gentlemen, Shirley MacLaine gets up in the morning just like every other woman on this earth. She looks in the mirror and she says, "Another wrinkle! Oh, no!" And she takes her face with makeup to hide it all because she's getting older. She cannot create a universe, never will create a universe. She's going to grow old and she's going to die. In the meantime, she has to pay her rent and her bills, and she has to make enough money to make sure that she can. She has to get along with her neighbors and with society as a whole. She may have fooled herself, or somebody else may have fooled her. But I have not been fooled. Shirley MacLaine is not God. And neither are you, and neither am I. And not a single person listening to this broadcast or out of earshot of this broadcast, not one human being is ever going to be God. Period. End of subject. It is the height of insolence and arrogance to even consider that such a thing could happen. The snake and the dragon, both the symbols of these societies, are ancient symbols of wisdom. Lucifer is nothing but the personification of the symbol, the metaphor, so to speak. In the Bible, it was Lucifer who tempted Eve to entice Adam to eat of the tree, or the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and thus free man from the bonds of ignorance according to their belief. Now remember, the worship, which is a lot different from study of knowledge, science, or technology, is Satanism in its purest form. And its God is Lucifer. Its secret symbol is the all-seeing eye in the pyramid. Ladies and gentlemen, undesirable effects of secret societies and their aura of mystery has sometimes given them the reputation for being abnormal associations, or at the very least, strange groups of people. But whatever their beliefs are, those of the majority, they are no longer considered antisocial. A good example is the Christian church, which was at one time a secret society persecuted by the government of Rome under the Roman Empire. In fact, the open, friendly, secret society actually ruled most, if not all, of the known world at one time after that. Most secret societies are generally considered to be antisocial. They are believed to contain elements that are not liked or are outright harmful to the community in general. At least that used to be the case. And it is exactly the case in some instances. For instance, communism and fascism are secret societies in many countries where they are prohibited by law. The Nazi Party in Germany sprang out of the Tool Society, which is a secret society created by the old Teutonic Knights who escaped the persecution as members of the Knights Templar. How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that the Nazi Party sprang out of the Tool Society, that Adolf Hitler was a member and follower of the occult tradition of the mysteries? In this country, the Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan are secret societies due mostly to the fact that the general public is disgusted by them. Their activities are sometimes illegal, thus the secrecy of their membership. The early Christians were a secret society because Roman authorities considered them from the start to be dangerous to imperial rule. The same was true of the followers of Islam. At least some of these true believers, working in secret, accomplished what would turn out to be the eventual good of society. The Drusid and Yazidis in Syria and Iraq consider the Arabs a dangerous secret society dedicated to the takeover of the world. The Arabs today think the same of the Jews. Catholics and Freemasons used to have precisely the same ideas about each other. And in many primitive or backward societies, initiation into the highest degrees of the group involved subjection to trials which not infrequently resulted in death or insanity for the candidate. It can be seen, ladies and gentlemen, that social right and wrong is not the yardstick in estimating the value of a secret society. In Borneo, initiates of hunting societies consider it meritorious and compulsory to hunt heads. In Polynesia, infanticide and debauch were considered essential for initiation into their societies, where the tribal code needed members who indulged in these things as pillars of society. Now, since the beginning of recorded history, governmental bodies of every nation have been involved with maintaining the status quo to defend the establishment against minority groups that sought to function as states within states, or to oust the constituted authority and take over in its place. A good many of these attempts have succeeded, but have not always lasted. Man's desire to be one of the elect is something that no power on earth has been able to lessen, let alone destroy. People will go to the most unbelievable lengths in order to do something that they know is wrong, if they believe that their friends and neighbors and relatives will approve of it. It is one of the secrets of secret societies. It's what gives them a political base and lots of clout. Members often vote the same and give each other preference in daily business, legal, and social activities. It is the deepest desire of many to be able to say, I belong to the elect. I am God. I wield power in this community. The most important of all of these ancient groups is the Brotherhood of the Snake or Dragon, and was simply known as the Mysteries. The snake and dragon are symbols that represent wisdom. The father of wisdom is Lucifer, also called the Light Bearer. The focus of worship for the Mysteries was Osiris, another name of Lucifer. Osiris was the name of a bright star that the ancients believed had been cast down onto the earth. The literal meaning of Lucifer is bringer of light, or the morning star. After Osiris was gone from the sky, the ancients saw the sun as the representation of Osiris, or more correctly, Lucifer. Osiris was represented by the sun. That's a quote from Albert Pike. Isaiah 14, verse 12, How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Fred Giddings, Symbolism in Occult Art, said, It is claimed that after Lucifer fell from heaven, he brought with him the power of thinking as a gift for mankind. Most of the greatest minds that ever lived were initiated into the society of mysteries by secret and dangerous rites, some of which were very cruel. Some of the most famous were known as Osiris, Isis, Sabazius, Cybele, and Eleusis. Plato was one of these initiates, and he describes some of the mysteries in his writings. Plato's initiation encompassed 3 days of entombment in the Great Pyramid. None of the Great Pyramids were ever tombs, ladies and gentlemen. They were always, from the beginning, temples of initiation. Plato's initiation encompassed 3 days of entombment in the Great Pyramid, during which time he died symbolically, was reborn, and was given secrets that he was to preserve. For the 3 days he lay in the sarcophagus, and that's the true purpose. Plato's writings are full of information on the mysteries. Manly P. Hall stated in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, that, quote, the illumined of antiquity entered its pyramid of Giza portals as men. They came forth as gods, end quote. I say they came forth as men deluded to believe that they were gods. The ancient Egyptian word for pyramid was kuti, which meant glorious light. Mr. Hall says also, quote, the pyramids of the great Egyptian temples of initiation, end quote. The first secret, ladies and gentlemen, that one must know to even begin to understand the mysteries is that their members believe that there are but few truly mature minds in the world. They believe that those minds belong exclusively to them. And so, they believe that all of the rest of us are nothing but stupid animals, to be shepherded, to be sheared, and if necessary, and when necessary, to be led to the slaughter. I hope that these last 3 hours have caused you to become illumined. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless each and every single one of you.